Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another indie comic review, and in this indie comic review I'll be covering The Joneses, issue 3 of 5, Rogue Sun, and the first issue of Samurai Sonja. I'll get things quickly prepared so I can start to cover the first one that I'll be covering. So moving into the first one, it is The Joneses by Marici and Viti, and whatever the other one's called. And as we begin, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside of the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 7 out of 10. I'll now jump to showing some of the internal art as well as some of the things that are happening in regards to the story, to which we'll have a look at around the beginning, middle and also the end. As we look to the beginning of the story, we have one of these, I think they're called Reborns if I remember, and it's taking out a group of robbers. Sorry for a little bit of the shading here. I think I might have chosen a better time of day to do this review, but as long as you can see what I'm trying to show you here. Alright, I'll now move towards the middle of the story. As we start to move towards the middle of the story, well, guess what? The neighbors finally learn that, well, the people they're living next to are actually what would be seen as reborns, or their version of mutants in this world. And of course, they've got neighbors' kids playing with their kids, and a bit of a discussion. I'll now move towards the end. And as we start to move towards the end, a somewhat little kerfuffle occurs. And we also have, well, it looks to be another reborn being somewhat their neighbour, who we originally believed to be a normal person in this area, but it looks to be something more. So for the overall art rating, I gave it a 7 as I did enjoy it. Now it's time to move to the story. First things first, did we get any comic references to any of the previous issues? No, we didn't. It needed it. The next area is that of time. Did we get anything in relation to time as to when some of these events took place? No, we didn't. And it's actually destroying the story, to be completely honest. And the next is the location. Again, no sign of the location once again. It's destroying this story, like, in a big way. And last but not least, the area of the cast of characters. Well, we only managed to get 2 cast of characters names because the writer was too lazy to put in everyone else's name that is actually important to the story. And I can see this story actually go to the wayside. And whether I choose to review the next issue in this series, I'm not completely sure. I think this could actually be losing its place in the reviews. So I'll have to see how they go with issue 4. So overall story rating, because I know that there are more to the cast, and none of the other cast members were actually addressed. The story rating for this is actually starting to put itself in line to drop into fool's gold. And the story rating is 5 out of 10. Now it's time to move to the next story, or the next comic. Alright, now it's time to cover Rogue Sun, and I must admit, I have really been enjoying this run and this series. It's worth the pickup, and I'm already excited to pick up the trade paperback for it when it comes out. So jumping into first things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it an 8 out of 10. I'll now move to showing some of the internal art in connection to the story, around the beginning, middle and end. Now this is some of the story around the beginning, and in it we have the character of the Monica, who is actually transforming into Dylan's mother and practically playing mind tricks with him, because she was let loose in the last issue. And we have a bit of a discussion between Dylan and his long dead father, and we definitely get to learn some things along the way. As we jump towards the middle, we actually get some flashbacks, and we also get a bit of a flashback at the beginning too. And I'll be able to address this soon enough when I get to the story rating, because I really liked how it executed this. And now towards the end, and as we start to jump towards the end, we see the character of the Monica starting to get her comeuppance. As the rogue son, Dylan, watches on. I must admit, this story so far, in relation to Rogue Sun, has been a real joy to read through. And for the internal art, I gave an 8 out of 10. So, big, huge difference compared to the last comic I covered in this. Now it's time to jump to the story rating. First things first, did we get any comic references? No, we didn't. But let's see how it affected the story in regards to the rest of the items that it did actually include. Now, in regards to time, this is the order to which it covered, like, the series of events. So it started off with the past, then it moved to the present, then it moved to the past and present. Then it moved to sort of like 6 months ago, so before the death of Marcus Bell. So we got to see what happened there in connection to him and Dylan's mother. And we eventually end up coming to 1 week later, and then eventually the present again. So it was really interesting seeing that go through in relation to the story, because you could definitely see that this writer wants you to be able to follow what he is putting out story-wise. And it was actually pretty well defined in the story, and you could see that in the story. And I enjoyed that in the story. Moving into the area of location, we had Crescent City, and we ended up having the medical center. So we got to see basically the day that Dylan was born. And of course we had his old man there, as well as his mother. Then eventually we moved to the present, which they now live in New Orleans. The cast of characters consisting of Gwen, Dylan, Marcus, the Monica, and the rogue son, who is also Dylan. The overall story rating for this, I gave a 7.5 out of 10. If this keeps going, I can see this maybe going to an 8.5 out of 10. The way this story has been executed. Keep up the great work, Mr. Parrot, sir. You've really got me hooked into this series. Maybe a little bit more hooked into this series than Radiant Black and Radiant Red. This one has been worth reviewing on the channel. Well, now it's time to move to the last one, which is Samurai Sonia. Well, now it's time to cover Samurai Sonia. As much as I love this cover, I wish the story was a little bit stronger in this. So, time to get moving into first things first. Does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that is happening inside of the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 7 out of 10, to which we have this character of Sonia that is actually holding a blade given to her by her father. Now it's time for me to move into the internal art, which we'll have a look at around the beginning, middle and end. Now this is some of the art around the beginning, to which we see the character of, that is Samurai Sonia, and she's with her uncle on a bit of a dragon ship, but we've got no indication of whereabouts they are in the Sea of Japan. That stuff is important in storytelling. I'll now move towards the middle. As we start to move towards the middle of the story, this takes place a little after Sonia wakes up on an island after some destruction comes to their ship, and at first she's believed to be dead until she wakes up on an island. And on this island we of course encounter some Oni, or some demons of sorts, maybe even a yokai. And last but not least, towards the end of the story, to which she finally defeats what she was up against earlier. So for the internal art, I did actually quite like the art, to which I gave it a 7 out of 10. But now it's time to move in relation to the story. Now, jumping into first things first, seeing that we don't really need any comic references, we will move on to the things that are important, especially in relation to the first issues. Now, did we get anything in relation to the area of time? No, we didn't. It would not have hurt to have included it in the story, though, as to give the reader an idea as to when this is actually meant to be taking place in this character's history. Next, the area of location. No idea of where the hell it took place in location. Again, this is important, especially if you want me, the reader who paid for this, to pick up more of your comics and give you more cash. And last but not least, we had the cast of characters, to which we had Sonia, her uncle, and of course the meeting of a deity or a goddess in the story, to which she gives her somewhat a special mission to take the role of cleansing the world of demons. It wasn't very clear as to who the goddess was. It would have been good if they gave an actual name. So in that, it's a bit of a flop. Where this story did excel was actually in a lot of the visual. But overall, in the rest of the story, it really, really lacked. I'll see how I go with the next couple of issues in relation to this, because I am a bit of a big fan of samurai, ninja, and all that nonsense. I think I've done martial arts in the past, and also had a number of books as well on the topic. But that's neither here or there. What is the overall story rating? The story rating for this I gave for it is a 6 out of 10. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.